Anyway, tonight we're going to talk about restoring old radios, and Joseph's going to talk about cleaning buttons and knobs and removing dirt from faceplates and fixing common problems with old radios, aligning and testing old radios, updating old rigs with new tech. And if you guys remember, we talked a while back about relighting. I'm sure you guys will get back into that a little bit about backlighting and stuff. And so we're going to be talking about this for the next hour or so, hour and a half, however long we do it, doesn't matter.
I want to preface all of what I'm about to show you by saying I am not a super reliable source for this kind of stuff. If anyone knows better or thinks that something I'm doing here when I restore these radios is bad practice, definitely let me know, because I don't want to be giving out information that would be bad. I have restored several radios now, and I do the same thing pretty much every time, and the results usually come out really nice. But I'm always looking for ways to make this better. So if you have any suggestions for how to improve upon any of this, please let me know. So I've restored a bunch of radios. I've restored a handheld, and I've restored like 3 different mobile radios. And I love using old radios. Something about them. I like the physical buttons and switches instead of navigating through 20 menus. You know, having like a flip switch to change the offset direction and a knob to turn to select the tone. Like, that's just pretty cool to me. I like the physical buttons and switches on these older radios, so that's why I like them. So I'm going to show you how to clean the buttons and knobs, remove the dirt from the faceplate, and all that weird stuff that gets on there after 20 years of hard use. Aligning and testing is one thing I don't know too much about, but I know the basics of how to do it, and I have done it. So there's a little bit of information about that in there. And then updating old rigs with new tech. So this is talking about batteries and tone encoders and lights and stuff like that. Putting modern technology into an older radio to make it work better. And then, so we're going to go with all of the cleaning, and then we're going to go to the electrical parts at the end. There are 2 things that I find very useful when I restore a radio. And number 1 is an ultrasonic jewelry cleaner. You can get these for pretty cheap. They cost like $30, I think. And then Q-tips, because those are great for getting in between like speaker grills and stuff. Those work really well. And then dish soap is like the agent that I use with all of it. I know there's like better options. You can get like real cleaning solutions and stuff like that, but dish soap seems to do fine every time. The ultrasonic cleaner uses like a piezo diaphragm, so it's actually vibrating the water at a very high speed. It's almost like water. It's actually kind of cool. If you have it on and you have the water with no soap in it, you can actually see like the waves on the water. It's almost like radio. And they usually use it for jewelry because the way it works is it actually kind of gets dirt and debris out of the tiniest cracks that you could never clean normally. It just kind of like dissolves it almost. It's kind of amazing. And so if you put parts for radios in there, it works very well, because radios are kind of like jewelry in that they have a lot of little nooks and small cavities, and just they had a lot of them just attract this stuff. And especially after 20 years, you know, your knobs and switches that were once, you know, looked like chrome are now brown. And that's pretty gross. I wouldn't want to use a radio with 20 years worth of dust and skin on it. It is especially useful for push to talk switches, because these often have like a grip pattern on them with like little ridges and stuff, and that will get just full of dirt. And then you put this thing in there, put the switch in the water and turn it on, and it just cleans it in like 30 seconds. So what I've done for today's presentation is I've actually documented from start to finish one of my most recent full restorations, which was a Kenwood TR2500 handheld radio that I actually got from the swap shop. And it was pretty bad when I started. I have some pictures, but we're going to go through all that and just kind of talk about each step as we go, and go from there. So here are 2 pictures. On the left, we have the before picture, and you can see that there's a lot of, I want to say like fabric fuzz. I don't know if that's spider webs. I don't think it's spider webs. It looks to me like maybe
some kind of gravy stuff.
Yeah, it's like fuzzy and there's a lot of dirt and dust on there, especially in the offset switch. There's just a lot of it. Um, and you can see it on the like on the logo. The logo's kind of yellowed a little bit, and there's you can't really clean in between the letters very well. And underneath like the squelch knob and everything, it's just pretty dirty. So and on the right we have the after picture, and you can see it's cleaned up beautifully. It almost looks as good as it would have on day one. Certain things just can't be fully restored. Some of them will just lose their color. Metal parts for some reason, like the headphone jack, you can see it's sort of turned like a slight green color almost, and it's got like this grainy pattern on it that I don't really know how to remove. I have another radio with the same problem here, a TS440S HF radio, and the microphone cable, the metal part is not shiny anymore. It's got some kind of problem with it. So the first step when you're doing this, I like to get a clean space. My workshop tends to be just like a pile of stuff, and then I push the pile of stuff over and just start working on something new. But for this kind of thing, you kind of can't compromise. So I have this on top of my little bookshelves. I cleared everything off of there, and I have a white surface, which turns out to be very useful because there's a lot of little screws, and if you lose a screw, that can be a problem. So I also have a magnet. The little red thing there is a magnet, and that's good for sticking screws on. And you just pull them all right off, because putting a radio back together, you always end up with one extra screw or one too few screws, and a magnet helps with that a lot. A magnet bowl is another option. I like magnet bowls as well. So what I'm saying here is you got to remove the screws. In this case, there's 4 screws on the back cover holding the 2 halves of the radio together. That's usually what I do first, but obviously the second step would be to pull off all the switches, because a lot of these switches and knobs will prevent you from taking the whole radio apart because they're actually in between. They're usually stuck onto a potentiometer, and if you start trying to take it apart, you'll bottom out on the switches. So taking the screws off and taking all the exterior buttons off that you can are probably the first steps. They're kind of interchangeable, but that's just how I happen to do it this time. Here you can see I'm removing the 2 volume and squelch knobs. This radio didn't actually have that much that needed to be removed besides that, because everything else was kind of inside the case. But HF radios especially, they have a ton of switches on them and knobs. Knobs are the main thing. Switches you usually don't have to remove, but knobs usually do. So yeah, screws out and the knobs out. You got to take the radio. You have to pretty much separate everything. So the first step in separating the whole radio apart is what I do is look at the circuit board. In handhelds, they get banged around a lot, and this one actually had a speaker wire that was broken. So that was one of the first things I noticed when I took the cover off. And then of course, obvious signs of damage like a short circuit or like a burn mark on there. If I saw a burn mark on the circuit board, I might forgo actually restoring the radio, because I know, hey, this thing isn't going to work. I did actually power this on before I started taking it apart, so I knew it worked. But stuff like that. I usually look for signs of obvious catastrophic damage on the circuit board. And a lot of radios, almost every single 2-meter 440 or HF radio I've ever taken apart has got a wire going in between the top half of the cover and the actual circuit board, which will keep you from taking them fully apart. So microphone and speaker wires are a big problem. You usually just got to unplug those so that you can actually take the 2 halves apart and fully disassemble it. Remove all the buttons. So when you take the face plate off, there's usually more buttons underneath there, and if you want to get those cleaned, you got to pull them off, and they usually come off of the buttons pretty easily. You just like pull them straight out. Some of the buttons and knobs will have like a little Phillips head in the side of it. Sorry, not Phillips head. You'll have to stick a really small Allen key in there and actually loosen it. That's something I've seen a few times. And then I collect all the little buttons. You can see I have like 4 or 5 buttons here. I put them in this little glass bowl I had, because you don't want to lose those. Those are very important. So keep taking the radio apart, and your goal is to get all the electrical components out of the chassis bits that you want to clean. So if there's a top and a bottom cover, a faceplate, usually the faceplate is all you really need to clean. The back of the radio is not as important. I mean, you could dust it off and wipe it down, but you usually don't need to do much more than that. So the faceplate is the main thing, and you want to just take everything out of there, a complete full disassembly. You can see here in the picture, the finished product with the front, back taken off, the keypad taken off, and the top of the radio also taken off, the little plastic inserts that house all that stuff. In the front of the radio, behind the speaker grill, there was actually like a sort of like a foam filter kind of thing that you can leave in there even when cleaning it, because it'll dry out fine, and it hasn't degraded. I thought some of these parts would, be turned into dust after 20 years, but no, they were fine. So in this example, I left the foam insert in. Same goes for speaker mics. I've done what do you call a like the talkie bit, the microphone? Because I know you call it a speaker mic if it's like for a handheld, but I guess you just call it a microphone. I've left the little foam insert in there, and that gets a good cleaning as well, and it dries out fine. So this is what I did for this project, and it didn't turn out to be all that good. It made a little bit of a difference, but I could have skipped it and just gone straight to the ultrasonic cleaner. I put some warm water in a bowl and then a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in there. I had heard that was good for cleaning, and I had used it in the past for cleaning other things. So I just thought I'd try it. I used a Q-tip, and I kind of tried to clean the speaker grill out on the front of the radio. It did help. The physical contact was pretty good. I don't think the hydrogen peroxide really did all that much. I mean, without it, I don't know. It made a difference when I did it, but after I saw how good the ultrasonic cleaner did, I wasn't sure if it was really worth it. So keep that in mind. Now you want to take your ultrasonic jewelry cleaner, and these things are awesome. This one here, it only costs like $30, I think, and it works amazingly. If you want a little bit bigger one, it's going to cost more. If you want to put like a large faceplate in there, the whole thing in there, you're gonna need a pretty big one. Or you could like put half of it in and the other half. But this one was okay. This is what we had. And so I just started putting bits in there. I put some dish soap in, and then warm water, and you just kind of put whatever you want to clean in there. Once you start this thing, if you actually watch it, the first time you use it, it's kind of amazing, because you'll just see, like, as soon as you turn it on, this like cloud of dirt just kind of puff off of every surface. And it's like, man, all that stuff was on there. So it's pretty cool. When I did that, I put it in there for about 30 seconds is usually all you need, but I usually run it for about 3 minutes just to get it really like nice and clean. But 30 seconds, it usually doesn't make much of a difference after that. So in the picture, you can see I'm lowering the front of the radio in there, and I have the each bit in there. When I do a different, hold on, yeah, that one's in there. So when you switch between pieces, if you do the whole front cover, and then you do the back cover, in between those, you want to change out the water, because it's going to be gross. In the picture, you can see I have the keypad cover and the top of the radio in there as well. Turning the parts over,
or some dishwasher soap.
Yeah, I have dish soap, but not really dishwashing soap. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
There's probably something out there that would work even better.
I'm talking about something like Dawn or something like that.
Yeah, that orange stuff.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. We have that at work. That's some good stuff. But if you're putting this in there, so the little waves come up from the bottom of the machine. So if you're putting something in and you make it face down, it'll clean a little bit more thoroughly, because it's getting a direct impact from the ultrasonic waves. Make sure you put the push to talk in there. This thing was like brown when I put it in here, and it came out gray. Like it looked brand new when I pulled it out. Then you want to put, all your buttons in there. I run everything separately, like I said. That way you have clean water every time, and you do it in batches. So it works pretty good. I just dump everything in here. You do have to be careful, though, because if you dump all the buttons in there and the switches and knobs, don't pour this thing out in your sink without a strainer or something, because you're going to have a little bit of soap in there. So it's going to be a little bit of foam, and it's going to be really easy to miss these things. So what I usually do is I put a strainer or a colander in the sink, and I pour it into that, or I try and get as many out as I can and then pour it. Because if this thing goes down the drain, you ain't never getting it back. be very careful with that. Yeah, and if you stir the parts around as they clean, it helps it kind of get every surface and angle. Pretty much most of what I do involves this thing, and it's worked so well in the past. I don't see a lot of people using this. I've looked up how to restore radios before, and I hardly ever see anybody using this. And the other thing is it doesn't damage the parts. If you use certain cleaning solutions on there, you know, if you use alcohol or certain things on certain surfaces, you can rub paint off and kind of and mess up stuff. But this thing doesn't really have much that you don't really damage anything with it. It's really good. You can actually stick your finger in this thing while it's on, and it'll clean your finger, and your finger will feel very dry for a few hours. And yeah, while the things are going, I usually put them for 3 minutes. So while they are 3 minutes, not 30, while they are cleaning, I usually take the bits out, the electronic bits, and I use an air compressor. In this picture, I'm using a piece of a canned air thing because the air compressor makes a lot of noise and there were people sleeping. But be careful if you use an air compressor because some of these machines will actually blast out moisture after they've been on for a while, or something causes them to occasionally blast out a cloud of moisture, and you don't want to do that on a radio. So just make sure you're not sending out any water. But you do want to blow these things out because there's going to be dust in there, and if there's any kind of conductive anything in there, maybe a little piece of a solder or a little short wire or something that somehow ended up in there at one point, this will hopefully get it out. Because if you turn this thing on and you've got something shorting in there, it's going to be pretty bad. All right, once every part is clean, you got to put the radio back together. And I say take a lot of pictures before you take this thing apart. As you're going, take apart pictures. I know that the keypad on the front of this radio, I took a picture beforehand so I know where everything went because it's all the same. But yeah, definitely take pictures as you're taking this thing apart, and take pictures of the circuit board too. I have in the past actually been saved by having a picture of the radio. When I first got it, I had that Kenwood 7400A, really good radio. It was having a problem with it where it wouldn't transmit, and turn out the finals were blown. But there was something else in there that I thought looked like a burn mark on on one of the components, and I was like, oh no, did I fry something? So I went back to a picture I had from the day I got it and compared the two. And I realized that, yes, that mark was there before and the radio worked then. So that was unrelated. It wasn't really that bad of a mark either. It wasn't like, oh, something exploded in here. But having pictures from day one are really good that you can look back on it and notice any obvious changes. And then once it's all back together, you can see how good it looks. I have a few more pictures in here of how good it looks. The knobs you can see are bright and shiny. They were kind of brown before, and there's a lot of dust in between the grooves. Now they look like brand new. They're made out of chrome. Sorry, they're nice and shiny like chrome. They look great. The little buttons on there that you push in, even though those have like a kind of like a sandpaper surface almost. It's a weird surface, but those are like nice and clean, almost brand new. And the front of the radio looks so good too. Like, see, before here there was so much dirt. Even that's the other thing, these stickers on here that go behind the buttons, those are stickers, and if you try and clean those, I was trying to wipe them off, and I noticed that the corner of one of the buttons was actually it was messing up the sticker. But when you put in the ultrasonic cleaner, the water doesn't make the sticker come off, but it gets it clean without destroying it. So that's another big plus of the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see in the before picture how much dirt and nasty stuff there was in between the buttons. And now it's like shiny, clear. The yellowing is gone too. That's the other thing. I did not use any solution on the front of the keypad besides dish soap, and the yellowing is gone. It looks almost brand new. It's just amazing. The radio, yeah, so once you've done that, yeah, the radio looks great, but you may still have some problems. And I noticed that handhelds especially, I see a lot of people saying that handhelds will be off frequency, maybe not as much as a base radio for whatever reason. I don't know why. I knew this radio worked before I restored it because I gave it power and it turned on, and it was making a transmission. I could see it with the software-defined radio. But it was off frequency a little bit. Oh, yeah. So what I did was I actually use my RTL SDR. Find a known frequency like the weather station, and you can use in SDR Sharp, and in every SDR program, there's a PPM offset function where you can actually go in there and tune the dongle so it's frequency for so that you don't have to Like you can see in the picture, it says 162.400.150. This dongle was 150, it's 150 hertz off frequency. So that had to be fixed. And once it was, then you can actually go and transmit with the radio. You got to kind of do a weird thing here. You got to transmit into a dummy load or just the HT antenna. And then you got to find your tuning potentiometer. Now, every radio has a service manual. And if you find the service manual, you can usually go down to the bottom of the manual and it'll give you all kind of information for tuning. So I actually went in the service manual and I found the actual potentiometer that does the offset tuning. So I stuck a little screwdriver in here. This is not my picture. I got this from YouTube, but you stick a little screwdriver in the back here, and while you're transmitting, you watch the scope, and you just turn it one way, and if it goes lower in frequency, you turn it the other way, and it goes higher in frequency, and you just try and get it centered on a frequency. I did notice that when you went to like the lower end of this radio's frequency coverage, it would be like above on frequency. It'd be too high. And then if you went to the top bit of the range, it would be too low. And if you went to the center, it would be right on. So sometimes you might want to find like a medium here, because it was kind of weird. The potentiometer in this radio wouldn't let you tune more than a certain offset. You couldn't just keep turning it and keep tuning further and further down. It would kind of start to come back the other way if you kept turning. So you may want to like take samples of high, middle, and low, and then try and find a balance where they're all as close as possible, because you can be off frequency by a few hertz and still have no problems talking. It won't make any difference when talking into a repeater. This radio also has a potentiometer here that you cannot see in this picture, but that allows you to set the PL tone. This thing actually has a built-in tone encoder, which is kind of surprising for such an old radio. This was, I think, manufactured. It went into manufacturing in 1974, I believe. So that's a pretty old radio to have a tone encoder in it. And since everything in this area is 136.5, it made it really easy because I could just put in 136.5. SDR Sharp has a. Excuse me. Go out. Hey, go out. Go out. Go out. Sorry. Get out. Sorry about that.
Could have invited them in. We wouldn't have mind.
She was asking about
brother.
That was my little sister. Anyway, everything here is 136.5 hertz. So setting it was really easy. As I was saying, SDR Sharp has a really good plugin you can install that actually tells you it's a CTCSS decoder. So whatever tone is currently being transmitted, it'll show up on the screen. So I just tuned to my own signal, and why is Noah coming? Oh my gosh. Tuned to the transmit signal of this thing, and it just read out the current tone. And I just sat there with the little screw and I turned it until it read 136.5. This is not going to be as useful when I move because a lot of the repeaters up there have different tones. So I'm just going to set this to something that works with most of them and just use that. So that's pretty much the end of the restoration for that handheld, but I do have more information here. There are a few more common problems with old radios that I see a lot, not just from my own experience, but from watching other people work on these radios. Crackling potentiometers and ones where you have like dead zones. So I know Ian had a new radio he got a while ago where the volume knobs and the squelch knobs don't work unless there's like pressure applied to them just right, and then they work. And if you turn them too far one way, it cuts out. That's a pretty common problem. Another problem that is very, very common is no receive audio on a citizens band radio. Believe it or not, I do want to put a side note in here. CB is actually kind of making a comeback, I think. I've been listening to it a lot this past week, and I've been really impressed. As long as you don't go on channel 6, which is where all the just screaming and yelling is. Most of the other channels actually had like civilized discussion going on, almost like here on the ham bands. It was actually really interesting because I know that it's gotten a pretty bad reputation, but I feel like it's almost making a comeback because it was nowhere near as bad as I was expecting it to be from everything I've heard. And I used to listen, turn it on and see if I could hear anything. And whenever Skip would roll in, I'd go on channel 6 because that's the only place I heard any activity. And I was like, man, is this really what CB has become? It was just unbelievable. But now, in this, at least in this local area here, it's actually become pretty good, I would say. I've talked on it a little bit. And there's actually some pretty nice guys who live up in the Babcock Ranch area, and they talk on there almost every night. They're fun to listen to. So that's kind of why I'm including CB in this, because I do think restoring old CB radios is another really cool thing, especially if you're like a hobbyist going for like the 80s, theme on a lot of things, and maybe you have an old car or something, putting an era correct radio in there can make it even cooler. So there can sometimes be no receive audio on a Citizens band. I'll talk about that. Static but no receive, that's another one. No receive audio at all. I'm gonna talk about that. And then batteries for handhelds. When you get an old handheld, that battery is gonna be shot for sure. And I have a way around that. And then tone encoders, so that's another thing. If you have a button, switch, or potentiometer that is not working or is acting weird, switch cleaner or electronic cleaner, electric contact cleaner, this stuff is amazing. I had that shortwave DX150B shortwave receiver, and several of the bands on the band selector were not working. I went and got this exact stuff here in the picture from the auto parts store, and I sprayed it on the contacts and worked them back and forth a whole bunch, and it came to life. This stuff really works great. It's made in a way that does not cause shorts, it's not conductive, and it evaporates very quickly. So this stuff is really good. It'll even give you like a little sprayer on there so you can get in the potentiometers. So yeah, if you've got a bad switch or a bad potentiometer, which a lot of the old radios have, this stuff right here will save you from having to completely replace a potentiometer. If you have a CB radio and you have no receive audio, the microphone might actually be the cause of this. The CBs often use the microphone as part of the receive circuit. It has to be present in the system for it actually to give you any kind of receive audio. And I actually have a radio somewhere around here that has that problem. The microphone itself is something wrong with the contacts and the push to talk switch, because when you transmit, it actually disables the receive circuit and activates the transmit circuit. But if it never gets that unkeyed signal, it will not go into receive. It'll just be in this weird state where both receive and transmit are off. So get out your multimeter and do a continuity check between the pins on here to make sure that it's actually functioning as it should. If you pull the mic plug out of a functioning radio, and it'll go silent most of the time. I still don't know why they do that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but it makes it a little bit difficult if you're trying to rewire a microphone.
Hey, Joseph, there's
yeah.
another cleaner that you can use for your contacts and your volume controls and stuff, and that's deoxit.
Yeah.
I use that a lot.
Yeah, I got some deoxit here.
Okay, that's great.
So WD-40 contact cleaner.
Oh yeah, there's that stuff too. That's great. Thank you. I will if I need, I will maybe use that one day.
It's all work.
Another problem that I have seen a lot, not on any of my own equipment, but I like to watch videos of people restoring CB radios, ham radios. There's a few YouTube channels who do videos where they just pull up a radio and they're like, all right, we're going to fix this thing. And they go through everything and they show all their steps. And electrolytic capacitors, they die a lot and they can affect the receiver a lot is what I've seen. I've seen many times where the capacitors all need replacing. So if you're getting static out of the radio, but you're not picking up a signal, even a strong signal, it could be the capacitors. They might all need to be replaced because they go bad after 20 years, 40 years. Some of these radios I have are like almost 50 years old, which is really crazy that they still work. But yeah, check your capacitors. You can get kits on Amazon. You can buy a kit for like $10 and it has like 30 different kinds of capacitors in there of different values. And just buy a couple of those kits and you'll have like everything you could possibly need. Same goes for like diodes. Amazon is so cool. I've ordered like 4 kits off of there. I got a kit that gave me transistors. So now I just have like, if I ever need a transistor, I've got like 40 different kinds of transistors and they give you like 20 of each. So you got plenty. And they cost like $10. It's kind of amazing. And you can just get mass quantities of stock components and go in there and replace them. It's kind of like a must-have thing a radio, because I've used parts from it. I built stuff using the transistors. Absolutely amazing that you can get that. And then batteries for handhelds.
Yeah, back to capacitors for a quick one. Capacitors will leak, and they will damage the PCB, the printed circuit board. So it's a good thing to look out for. They will actually leak as they get older. And they've been renowned on some Icon machines, really not too old ones, like the IC746, the original. That has a problem with its capacitors leaking and then, making its own tracks on the circuit board.
Ooh, that's bad.
Yeah. So you take them out and you just clean it with like you say, a switch cleaner, and clean it with a toothbrush or something, and then you're back to scratch. Replace the capacitors and you're good to go.
Yeah, those capacitors will get you. I may have to do a full capacitor replacement on this HF radio I got recently, because I don't know what state it's in. It works now, but this radio apparently has a few common problems with it, and one of them is that you have to replace all the capacitors as well as diodes too, apparently. So that may be in my future. Not looking forward to it. That's a lot of work to replace 30 capacitors. Batteries, though, are another thing that never stand the test of time, and you can actually improve upon your antique radio's original performance by putting in a modern battery. Lithium ion, or in my case, lithium polymer batteries can fit. That Kenwood I have, I wish I still had, I could show you, but inside of the battery compartment, it used to have five nickel cadmium cells in it to reach a voltage of 8.4 volts. But I actually just took a 2-cell lithium polymer battery. I use a lot of lithium polymer batteries for radio control models for airplanes and drones and trucks. A lot of them use lithium polymer. So I had one of these, and a 2-cell LiPo usually has a half capacity voltage of 7.4 volts. I think it is. I think it's 7.4 volts. So it's a little bit low for an 8.4 volt system, but when it's fully charged, it's actually closer to 8 volts or even 8.2. And the radio will run off of it fine. I used that radio when I went to field day, and I just had a 2-cell LiPo, and there was a 1,000 milliamp hour 2-cell LiPo. And,
You have to have different
powered it, no
charge.
problem. Radio didn't care, and it was lighter too, because it used to have 6 of these large nickel cadmium cells in there. They're like AA's, but a little bit bigger. Now it was so much lighter with this battery, but it didn't even care. You get more capacity. It was less. I think there was less total capacity, but it didn't end up mattering because I had it on low power anyway. It's kind of one of those things. You can put heavier batteries in there, but this thing already weighs so much. We're so used to these lightweight radios now. You go back to the old thing, and it's like, man, this is a brick. So putting a LiPo in there works out pretty good. If you're doing a 2-meter 440 radio, this is something that I have done a long time ago, back when I got I inherited this old radio, the Kenwood 7400, and it had no tone encoder, so I couldn't use it on any of the repeaters. But I actually came up with a solution that I'm still pretty proud of today. I used a function generator app on an old iPhone, and I plugged in a cable to the headphone jack. And then I actually you can't see it in this picture here, but in the side of the case, I drilled a hole and I put another audio jack in there. And then I wired the center conductor. There's this little yellow wire. I don't know if you can see it here. It says, right, and where it plugs into where it says active filter. This little yellow wire runs and plugs in it. That is injecting the tone past the microphone circuit. So you don't have to worry about the circuit filtering out high or low frequencies. And it worked so well. It was amazing. You plug the phone in there, and it's like the radio had tone encoder from day one. You can buy tone encoder modules for a lot of these radios, but good luck finding them. They're long since been discontinued, and they're usually pretty expensive if you can find them. So putting your own system in there is a lot easier and can be a lot cheaper, especially if you have a dedicated tone encoder like this. These are usually pretty cheap, surprisingly. I got donated this one by, oh man, can't remember who it was. I did thank him though for it, so at least I feel okay about that. But I got donated this after I talked about the radio on a TechNet one night, and it's a communication specialist TE32, and I love this. It actually wired into the old connection that I had on the radio. All I did was supply it with 12 volts, and it runs with a single cable straight into the back of this thing. And it's really cool because you can change the tone with the physical knob, and then you have like an on-off switch and everything. It's like nice, good old analog interface there. And I did have one problem with it, whereas that I hooked it up for the first time and I tried to key up the repeater, but it wouldn't key up. And I did not have an oscilloscope on hand, so I couldn't check to make sure it was actually putting out a correct sine wave like it's supposed to. But I did check the manual, and it had a amplitude adjustment potentiometer in there. And I turned that all the way up to maximum. It still wasn't that loud. I think it's still on the lower end of what the radio expects, but it works. So I turned the amplitude all the way up and put it back together, and it works great on the repeater. Here's a picture of the original thing I did when I did the iPhone. You can see it's plugged in there. You got the cable. Using alligator clips to go into the back of the radio. And, it actually worked. I was pretty happy about that. Kind of fun to mess around with radios and get things working. So in conclusion, I think radios can be a lot of fun to restore and use. I think restoration is part of the fun. I wouldn't really restore something that I didn't plan on using. I think if there was like a really cool old radio that's kind of like collectible, I might restore it for it to sit on a shelf. But I love using old radios. So restoring them is part of the fun, because then you actually sit down and you get to use it. It's like, I fixed this up and it works. So I'm really hoping this was entertaining and helpful. Not the most experienced with it, but it's one of my little side hobbies. So someday I'll be good at it, I guess. That's about all I have.
I think Dave had a question for you.
That's a great presentation. But my question is, what kind of dish soap did you use?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's just kind of like off the shelf Publix brand green dish soap.
Okay, yeah, we use Dawn here. I find Dawn to be a very good cleaner. It cuts grease real quick. So anyway, thank you for that, Joseph. I enjoyed it a whole lot.
Yeah, Dawn's great. Dawn cleans birds great too. It's actually what they use to clean the birds when oil spills happen.
Absolutely.
Next week we'll do bird restoration.
Yes, bird restoration. All right. Next week on the TechNet.
Here, I'm gonna switch it over to you.